Hey everybody, it's Graham and Micah with Brother Telepathy Football. We are back here with our next video. We're talking about NFL free agency. So as of the recording, we are pretty much through day 2 of free agency. So don't have every listing here, but just wanted to highlight some of the notable ones, some of the notable contracts, things like that. Mike and I do have our phones here with us, so if anything breaking happens during the recording, maybe we'll throw it in here. But we'll talk about a few things. I think next video we'll kind of talk about maybe like grading each team and that sort of thing, like actually maybe going a little deeper for the specific teams. But just want to talk about some of the notable free agents that are on this list here. So, yeah, I don't know, Mike, anything you want to add to that, or you want to go ahead and get into the first one?
No, we can just go straight into it. Graham, you
So,
kind of headed up this, so I'll let you kind of take over, but you can keep us moving.
yeah, no, so just wanted to just kind of some notable re-signings that happened before free agency. Now, one thing I'll note is that I don't think this would be as much of a talking point if there weren't so many teams re-signing their own players. I think a lot of that is due to just not a great free agent class this year. But obviously, just kind of the ones that stick out. Miles Garrett, Max Crosby first kind of set the precedent there, and then of course Miles Garrett got followed up shortly thereafter. A lot of these linebackers in particular didn't hit free agency. Looking at Ernest Jones for Seattle, Jamie and Sherwood for the Jets. A lot of these linebackers didn't get exposed to the open market, which I think was good for each individual team. And then, Chris Godwin may be the most surprising on this list being re-signed. Sounds like he turned down a lot of money to not go into free agency. So that was certainly a big win for Tampa Bay on that one. A few tags, of course, T. Higgins and Trey Smith being the only tags here. Those are notable. Nick Bolton, another linebacker who didn't hit free agency. So, yeah, a couple here just wanted to highlight. Micah, is there anybody on this list you want to talk about in particular or
Yeah,
anything?
I'm not going to touch too much on the Vikings ones because I don't want to feel too much like a homebody, but I think Aaron Jones was interesting. I did not expect to bring him back. Byron Murphy, I think, is a fair contract. I mean, he obviously led the league in interceptions last year, Pro Bowl season, so Byron Murphy was really interesting to see us bring him back. I think my favorite re-signing is actually Osa Odigizua.
Yeah, that
From the
was a
Dallas
notable one
Cowboys.
too.
I think that is huge for them. I think it might be the most important re-signing for them because I thought he was definitely going to test the market, but I'm glad to see that Dallas brought him back. Do you have anything that stands out to you?
In terms of like favorite, I would say maybe Jamie and Sherwood for the Jets. He was kind of a rising good player there at linebacker, and again, just somebody who wasn't going to hit free agency. I think the other one would be Baring Browning for Arizona. A fairly interesting young player brought back on obviously a team friendly deal, so maybe has a chance to get a bigger contract here when his one expires for Arizona. But I thought that was a good signing, and they need edge rusher help too, so might as well keep developing him. So that's probably the other one I would note on this list here. So.
Cool. I like it.
Yeah, first one here obviously was Devonte Adams chose to sign with the Rams, and so I think this is interesting. Obviously they are moving on from Cooper Cup, whether that be via trades. Doesn't sound like it's going to be a trade at this point. It sounds like it will be a release. I like this. I think a lot of people are wondering why would you get another aging receiver if you're just going to cut Cooper Cup. But I think that actually this is a good signing, and I don't know how you feel about this, like philosophically for the Rams. But while Devonte Adams and Cooper Cup have some similarities, I feel like Devonte is more of your X, and Puka can kind of be your Z. Whereas I feel like Puka and Cooper Cup kind of played a similar role in my opinion, and so I actually kind of like how they've got this true X receiver in Devonte. They can allow Puka to play the Z. They re-signed Tutu Atwell as well as kind of their wide receiver 3. So I actually like this for the Rams here.
I feel like I'm not afraid to say it's an upgrade. I mean, given Cooper Cubs, obviously had that Triple Crown season, Super Bowl MVP, one of the best receiver seasons ever. This isn't the same Cooper Cup. Devonte Adams has, at least for now, beaten Father Time at the moment.
Yeah.
At the moment,
Yes.
certainly a better player than Cooper Cup. Injury history is something to consider as well. So I think it's the right move. Moving on from Cooper Cup and replacing him with Devonte Adams. To your point as well, I think it's a scheme fit. Actually, a scheme fit works better as well. So I like
Yeah.
it.
Cool. Let's go ahead. You start off here with DK if you have any initial thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest DK Metcalf fan. I'll go ahead and just put that out there. I don't love the fit in Pittsburgh. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand the reason why they did it.
Yeah.
I just don't love the receiving duo of DK and George Pickens. That doesn't move me, especially considering we don't know who's going to be throwing the ball next year. It's too many variables for me. I don't like the contract they gave him. I don't like the capital they gave up for him, considering they had to pay him. I would have liked to see maybe a third for this. Second feels a little rich, especially considering this is a. I don't remember. Was it their own second? I believe it was.
I think it was their own second. Yep.
Yeah. So this is a. I'm not gonna say a premier second round pick, but kind of like a middle of the pack. I mean, I guess they're picking in the 20s, but either way, I don't like the trade. All that to say, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think on the opposite side of the coin that we just talked about with Devontae being a good fit and kind of complementing Puka, I feel like DK and George Pickens are kind of similar in some senses, being like a deep threat and things like that. Now, I think George Pickens is a much better like contested catcher than DK Metcalf is. But again, it's kind of like where's the fit exactly lie there? And so, yeah, neither of us are big DK fans. He's just maybe not turned into the player that some thought. He's more of that athletic profile, which we've talked about before. We prefer maybe some more technicalities out of our receivers, being just like a freak athletically. And then, yeah, you touched on the contract and trade value, so I'm with you on that. So I think we mostly agree on this one here.
Yeah, and last thing on DK, so we can keep this rolling, but I just don't like. I'm not interested in young guys who have progressively gotten worse. DK Metcalf to me has already peaked, and he's had a few seasons now where he's been on a steady decline. I think his I can't recall off the top of my head. It was either his rookie season or his sophomore season where he had, I think it was like 1,400 yards, and obviously that was the best visually he was performing. Everything else since then has been slowly declining. So I just this is like a D plus move for me overall, but we'll keep it pushing to the guy who was throwing him the ball last year in Geno Smith, and I'm actually a fan of this one. I mean, well, I'm not gonna say I'm a fan of it. I'm a fan of it for the Raiders. I don't. There's a lot of questions with the Seahawks, what they got going on, but we'll get to that. I think
On
that
the
a
next
20.
slide, I think.
Okay, well then we'll definitely get to it here soon. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders. I like the direction they're going, especially it kind of gives them an opportunity there picking at 6 to kind of go maybe best skill player available. I think like maybe pairing up Tet and Brock Bowers is something that I was really interested in. But that's enough about that. This is about Geno. Overall, I like the move for the Raiders getting Geno here.
Yeah, I think that Geno's a much better quarterback than casual fans maybe, or just people who aren't paying attention to quarterback play that intricately that then he gets credit for. He was able to navigate a horrible interior offensive line for the Seahawks, and again, maybe we'll get to the flip side of that with Sam Darnold here soon. But overall, I like the value. This was not their third round pick. This was from the Jets, actually, originally, I believe.
Okay.
So they keep their third round pick. I don't know if I updated it for the contract, to be honest. I don't know if the contract has come out, but I think it is a step above like the Sam Darnold contract here. So you are paying a little bit more, of course, for Geno, but there's obviously the relationship there with Pete Carroll at the helm. It sounds like Geno wanted to be paired back up with Pete Carroll. So I like it a lot for the Raiders. Again, really good quarterback, underrated quarterback still at this point probably. So yeah, I like it for them. I agree. And
Continues
then on the flip side,
to be written off. Yeah, sorry, I'll let you take
yeah.
this one over. I have to throw that in there.
I would say we had to throw that in there. It's just the
Yeah.
best quote. Yeah. But yeah, so now on the flip side, Sam Darnold, kind of to the point I just made, and that's why I wanted to go ahead and jump in and just say it here. Sam Darnold, obviously incredible year for the Vikings, and you can talk more about that. But I don't know if you'd agree, but I think the one maybe not one thing, but one of the main things he struggled with was just still playing with pressure. And, it feels like Geno had to do that a lot in Seattle, especially again because that interior offensive line just being such a deficiency for Seattle. And so from a fit standpoint, I'm just not sure about that. Plus with the receiving core they now have with JSN being their wide receiver one, you have to think they would make a move there, but I don't think they have in free agency at this point. So maybe they'll address that in the draft. But again, a few different things to touch on with that. But that overall, I think it's fine. It sounds like again this Geno wanted to part with Seattle, so if that was kind of the cards they were dealt, then I like the move from that standpoint.
Yeah, if that's the case, then the Seahawks are kind of in a bind at that point. They're kind of just maybe scrambling to get the guy. But obviously, they saw him up close and personal in it's not CenturyLink anymore. I can't remember what the field name is anymore. But Sam Darnold obviously balled in Seattle last year, so
Yeah,
they got a
did.
first-hand look. But
Yeah.
no, I I question, and again, this is about Sam Darnold. So as far as from his perspective, great deal. 3 years, 110 million.
For
Can't
sure.
really complain
Similar
too
to the
much.
Baker deal.
Yeah, can't complain too much about that. But it's a little head scratching from the Seahawks' perspective. I don't really know the direction they're going because
Right.
the deal, while it's not a prove it deal and it's not a long term commitment. Obviously, 3 years you're kind of wrapping him up for, so he's obviously going to be the franchise guy for the next 2 years at least. I don't really know the direction they're going because of the fire sale they had at receiver. So
Right.
we'll see what it transpires. But from a perspective of Sam Darnold, this is you can't really ask for much better.
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway here is what's the direction Seattle's going in. I think they had some promise last year. They were pretty close to making the playoffs, I think, if I recall. And so, of course, you lose out on trading away your quarterback. So but again, you do the fire sale receiver and you're making some changes. Maybe it would have been a good time to just do like a small reboot. I don't think they would have had to go into full rebuild, but maybe just, again, a small reset. But again, that's not really the direction with Sam Darnold at the helm, I would say. For, again, at least a 2-year deal. So, next one here. We did call this one. Have to pat ourselves on the back for this one here. Justin Fields to the Jets. It seemed like he was definitely going to be a Steeler or a New York Jet. He did end up going with the Jets. Sounds like they guaranteed him a starting spot. So, looks like there probably won't be much competition there. I doubt they draft a rookie this year. They've got Tyrod Taylor and they've got Jordan Travis as well on the roster still. He had a pretty bad injury, so who knows if he ever gets back into working condition there. But, they've kind of got that young developmental guy. Justin Fields is still young in his own right. So we talked about it, at length in our QB landing spots video. But this just seems like an Aaron Glenn guy, kind of chip on his shoulder type of deal here. So I think we both like this fit a lot and did, ultimately call it back a few weeks ago.
I think, like you said, we pat ourselves in the back. We definitely called it. It feels like an Aaron Glenn guy. The contract is a little bit more than I was anticipating. I mean, I don't know what the market for Justin Fields really looked like when you break it down. Obviously, we don't have access to that information, but I was kind of thinking more of the 2 years, like $25 million, or maybe even a 1-year deal with like $15 million. I don't know if you updated it, but Daniel Jones got 1 year, $14 million with the Colts. So.
Yeah,
I would have expected Justin Fields to warrant a little bit more because he's, obviously last year did his thing in the games that he started in from a winning perspective. But yeah, I think it's a good move. I like the fit with Aaron Glenn there. So that's kind of all I got to say about this one.
Yeah, I kind of give it like a B, I would say at this point. Jury's still out, of course. There's room there. If he balls out and they do well, then it goes up. If they don't, I don't think it's a horrible deal, but I think they did pay him a little bit more than it sounds like. It was really kind of like a 1 year, like $30 million deal is kind of how it looks. So again, pretty steep when you compare that to like a Daniel Jones, for instance. So
yeah.
Yeah.
For a 1 year guy, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, if that's kind of the plan, kind of just see what you got. Obviously 25 years old, I believe. So still young. It's going to be fun from the Jets perspective because they haven't had a quarterback like this.
Right.
I mean, in 10 years. So we'll see what that transpires into.
Oh, go ahead and skip that one. Sorry, folks. I think there's Russ on here too. We haven't touched on those yet, but of course we don't know. It sounds like they're either going to be a Steeler or a Giant, or vice versa, however that shakes out. So we'll talk about that more when those deals come out. So
yeah.
So then Josh Sweat, just, biggest name edge rusher on the market here. Signed a deal here with the Cardinals. Pretty big deal for them. So it'll be interesting to see if he lives up to that. I think he was, again, kind of like a hot ticket item in the edge rusher market. Obviously, it's a stronger edge draft class than free agency market. So this was really the main guy to go after, and the Cardinals did. So, again, kudos for them to re-signing Baron Brown, and then, of course, Browning, and then they've just added Josh Sweat as well. I think they probably could still look to improve their D-line. They still have Darius Robinson on there, too, from last draft cycle, and we'll see how he remains to, be seen at this point. But I think it's overall a pretty good deal for them. Again, just kind of bolster their D-line. What do you think about that?
Jonathan Gannon move here obviously has familiarity with Josh Sweat, so that's to me what makes the most sense. I think the Super Bowl and the playoff run, Josh Sweat maybe earned this contract not entirely through that, but definitely bolstered his value. But I like him as a player. I think it makes sense for the Cardinals, so I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, let's keep rolling.
Cool.
On the similar kind of token here, we got Milton Williams here signing a mega contract with the Patriots, swooping him right away from the Carolina Panthers, who, a lot of our friends are Panthers fans, so sorry, fellows, but
Our Panthers fans were not happy with this one. Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, it was reported that they had him, and then of course it was like, well, wait a second, he's still in talks with other teams. So sounds like the Patriots swooped in at the ninth hour here and kind of took him away at the end there. So yeah, no, good for the Patriots. I think they're going to try to bolster the trenches a little bit. They made some moves on both sides of the ball there. I think that makes sense from a Mike Vrabel. Let's build up the trenches. I think that's the way to go about it, to be fair. So, again, they paid him a lot, but I think again, a young ascending player, had his best season, I think, this past year with the Eagles. I think he had like 5 sacks or something like that. So I think it was, pretty high up there in the team, second or third or something like that. So obviously that was a stacked D line in of itself. So it'll be interesting to see Milton Williams on his own, kind of how he holds up. So
Yeah, I think for the Patriots, this makes perfect sense. They just lack talent pretty much everywhere. So when you can
Sure.
get the top free agent out of all of them, I think that is telling. So I'm glad they got him. I mean, that's big for them. It'll be interesting to see what they do at 4 because of it. A lot of people think tackle. I mean, there were Mason Graham. I've thought of the possibility of Mason Graham there.
Sure.
We'll see how likely that is now. I still think it's going to be offensive lineman to protect Drake May, but it's a great move for the Patriots.
yeah, I agree. So next one here, Drew Dahlman, top center on the market here, goes with the Bears. So the Bears fill that kind of final piece of the puzzle on the offensive line, at least for now. I'm sure they'll add some depth here going forward, but I think this is a good move from the standpoint of being top center. That was kind of the one glaring spot they had left on the offensive line after the Joe Tooney trade, after the Jonah Jackson trade. So they kind of had their tackles, established there, and so they just needed that center. And it sounds like the main thing here, they just want some leadership in that room. They definitely got that. They got guys who are willing to go to bat for one another, and so overall, I think it's a great move for them.
It's no secret that Ben Johnson has been putting his foot down with these moves here, trying to replicate that Detroit Lions offensive line. And I think Dahlman's actually probably my favorite acquisition they had of the 3, the 2 trades. This is my favorite acquisition they had. So yeah, I think Dahlman's a great player, obviously an ascending player as well. 3 years, $42 million is a strong contract for a center, so we'll see where it goes. And that transitions us into Will Fries, who is I'm absolutely thrilled about. Obviously, guard, interior offensive line for the Vikings was pretty horrible, and it showed in the come playoff time whenever they were getting bullied repeatedly from that Rams front. But 5 years, $88 million, steep contract, but this is a mauler in the middle. Young player, 26 years old. Obviously, I'm sure we'll get to it eventually, but we also signed Ryan Kelly to pair along, so there's some familiarity they're bringing in with the offensive line. This is an A-plus move for me. You got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, pretty steep for a guard. We obviously saw that kind of last year too, with like the Robert Hunt deal for the Panthers and some others. Guard is becoming, again, not of course as important as tackle, but I think teams are starting to realize that we need to shore up the interior of our offensive line as well. And there's just often a lot more depth there, be it the draft or free agency. So this was one of the stronger positions in the free agency class, in my opinion, was the interior offensive line. And so good for the Vikings for getting the top guy at that, and they're willing to pay the price for it. So good for them on that one.
Cool. And that brings us to Mr. Jalen Moore. 2-year, $30 million contract. A bit of a shocker. This was early in the tampering period. I think it was maybe the 3rd contract that had come out. 15 or 20 minutes.
Early moves. Yeah.
15 or 20 minutes after noon. So after 12 o'clock noon.
Yeah, right. The 15 minutes they got that deal done. Right.
Yeah, can you believe that? Yeah, they made it happen. They figured out all the contract and stuff a bunch of BS. But it doesn't matter. Jalen Moore, obviously not a ton of reps that we've seen from him, but in the moments where he did play, he graded out very well. I know a lot of people like PFF when it comes to offensive linemen. He graded out fairly well in the time that he did play. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this is you need to shore up left tackle for the Chiefs, and I think to go out and get a young player like this who doesn't have a lot of experience, mostly as a backup, actually, is kind of an interesting move. They didn't want to pay top dollar, so I understand that they're already paying They're going to be paying they're already paying the franchise tag, of course, for Trey Smith. And then they've got their center top contract as well. And so, again, it's like, and we'll get to this point here in a second with my Titans on the next one here. It's just hard to find a decent tackle in the free agent market. And so they ended up electing to go the cheap route, which, we've seen doesn't always work out. But of course, maybe it can, and then he'll get a bigger contract in the future. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But on to Dan Moore. So a lot of people are hating on this move for the Titans here on this one, and I can understand. It's a large contract here. You're talking about $20 million a year for at best, decent left tackle. And again, that's at best. He's really not the best player, but again, we're talking about kind of high end at this point. He's been decent, and last year was his best year. Now, I want to talk about a little bit of the positives because again, everybody's kind of hating on this. Let me start by saying this isn't overpay. The Titans know this is an overpay, but to the point I just made, you can't find a starting left tackle. They don't grow on trees. So when you have one in free agency, this is just the tax you pay for a starting left tackle. And so if anybody who did watch the Titans knows that Nicholas Petit-Frere is unplayable. He played right tackle for the Titans. There was a revolving door there. NPF consistently started, but he was the worst. J.C. Latham is able to easily go back to right tackle where he played at Alabama, and I think that actually suits him better. Dan Moore can slot into left tackle, and all really the Titans need at this point is a decent left tackle. This is kind of a Band-Aid move. Would eventually like to get your franchise left tackle at some point, but for the time being, as long as Dan Moore can be decent, that's really all the Titans need. If he's their third or fourth best O lineman, that's good enough for them. Just if you, again, watch the Titans offensive line play, you would know that's the case. And so you've got you got Bill Callahan there. Great offensive line coach. If anybody's going to get it out of a young player who's got some talent, it's going to be Bill Callahan. You still got, again, J.C. Latham. You got Lloyd Cushenberry at center. You got Peter Skoronski, who actually played really, really well at guard towards the end of the year last year. He's starting to come along. So if these young guys start to come along a little bit for the Titans, it could be a decent O-line. And again, I think really anybody who watched the Titans know that was kind of the Achilles heel for their offense last year. A lot of people want to put the blame on Will Levis, but really that offensive line was bottom 2, if not 1, in the league for the entire year. And again, right tackle was a complete revolving door. So I actually think this is a good move from the standpoint of you can address tackle now. There's not a deep tackle class in the draft class this year. You had to find a viable starter, and I think this was really the only way to do that this year.
And I think that I actually really like what Ian Rappaport said. I was tuned in on NFL Network and obviously had his tweet notifications on. He said something that I really liked. He said, if you're a tackle or offensive lineman, particularly tackle in the NFL, and people don't know your name, that's usually a good thing. And in the case of Dan Moore, the paycheck shows it. So I'm not going to touch too much on it, but I agree with everything you said. I second all of that. DJ Reed, we'll go ahead and transition straight into it from the division rivals. Steeper contract than I was expecting for DJ Reed. Not something that I'm in love with. I think for the Detroit Lions, it makes a lot of sense. They need talent, and the secondary needs talent as well. I know they had some young cats out there. They had Ennis Rakestraw and Terrion Arnold playing. Both of them didn't play particularly well, but they're both rookies, so maybe you let it slide. But and then Amik Robertson obviously was in that secondary as well. But I think that you're locking up. This is your CB1 to guard Justin Jefferson, and in the game that they played, he actually played fairly well against him. So we'll be seeing a lot of this matchup going forward with the Vikings Lions. But I think it's a fine move. It's not, I think there are better contracts out there. I guess after seeing what the Patriots gave to me with my name to Carlton Davis.
Yeah.
This looks a lot better, but I don't love that deal either. But either way, I think it's a good move for the Lions.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm actually kind of disagree with you a little bit. I think this is actually a really great move for the Lions here on this one. They needed some secondary help. This was arguably the best corner on the market this year in free agency, and so they got him locked in at what I believe to be a pretty good deal, especially with what corners went for in this free agency cycle. So I actually really like this move for the Lions. I think this is actually one of my favorite moves in the free agency cycle this season this offseason so far. So not much to touch on there. They needed a plug and play guy there to be their CB1. I think they got him. So yeah.
I think it makes sense. Agree to disagree, and then we'll transition straight to Carlton Davis.
Yeah,
I straight up hate this contract.
I do too. I was going to
Not a
say, flip
fan.
side, this is a terrible deal, in my
Not a
opinion.
fan of it. We'll see. I'm sure we'll. I don't know if you have a Giants contract on here, but we'll get to that. I'm sure. Either we'll talk about it in another
Yeah,
video, or we'll get to it. But yeah,
yeah,
not a fan of this contract. I just think, and on contracts, real quick, I know the salary cap has increased, so these look a little bit more inflated than what we're used to.
good point.
But I'm not a fan of Carlton Davis. I watched him a lot, obviously being in Detroit, being a division rival. So not the biggest fan, but Patriots need help at that position, so they can afford a little bit of an overpay for a
They
solid
can.
starter.
They can. I was going to say, they've got the most space. They can afford it. Somebody opposite Christian Gonzalez. So from that standpoint, it's fine, but I think this is way too much for him, and I think that this is just not the best deal. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
On the flip side, I think this is a good move, and Colts kind of being un-Colts like. They're making some splashes in free agency, especially their secondary. I think that was one of their weaker positions. So good on them for doing some stuff here in free agency. Very un-Chris Ballard like, but I think that Chris Ballard probably knows he's on the hot seat, although he really should have been for years at this point. He's maybe finally on the hot seat, and as a result, they're actually making moves in free agency as a result of that. So I really like what they did in their secondary. We will talk about Cam Bynum here in a minute, but yeah, they got Javarius Ward here. Again, another top corner on the market. Paid him a little bit more than you'd like to, maybe, especially when you look at like the DJ Reed contract. But I think this is a good player at a position of need and somewhere they needed to bolster. So I like it ultimately.
yeah. For me, this is the top corner in the in free agency. We probably disagree on that. You probably like DJ Reed a little bit better. I prefer Javarius Ward.
They're up there though. I mean, both of them. So
I know the 49ers DBs usually play well. It seems like they have, with that system, they kind of have a revolving door of DBs. But I think Charvarius Ward is actually a really skilled DB. And that contract, as you said, might be a little expensive, but when you compare it to someone like Carlton Davis who got the same deal, I think that you're excited about this one. And the Colts are definitely the most improved position group, that secondary. But we'll get to that with Cam Bynum. But first off, the other safety, Javon Holland, who got 3 years, $45 million. You got any thoughts on this one?
yeah, I think this is a great deal for the Giants. The Titans were in on this. The Colts were in on this. There were several teams that were in on Javon Holland for good reason. He's a young, good player. He wasn't. He didn't finish the best in Miami, but he started out really well, and he's still, again, arguably one of the best free agents in this cycle. So definitely a coveted player. He's still very young too. He's like 25 or 26, and so good deal too. I would say. Some people are saying this is way too steep. I completely disagree with that. People were talking about maybe him going for 20 million a year. Of course, gets closer to like the 15 range-ish here on this one. So yeah, I think this is a great deal for the Giants. They improved their secondary there. Next to Tyler Nubin, I think is their other safety, and so yeah, that's a pretty good duo. They've improved their secondary quite a bit as well. So they're making some moves. They need to find that quarterback, of course, but I think this is a good move for the Giants, and they're obviously trying to rapidly improve as well.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go as far to say I think this is maybe one of the best moves of free agency so far,
I would
considering,
agree.
the Giants obviously had to pay Darius Slayton, and I think that happened before this move. They paid Darius Slayton big money to come back, 12 million a year, I believe it was,
Yeah,
to be their wide
right
receiver
around, right
three.
around there.
So, considering they can bring in talent, I think that's what that move kind of shows, is that they're grasping for straws a little bit. So the
Right.
fact that someone, as you mentioned, young, maybe a little bit of an injury bug this past year, in the past couple years, wants to come to New York just to play, I think is fantastic. And obviously this is, as you mentioned, one of the top 10 or 15 free agents in the class. So this is a great move for me, and I don't think the contract is that crazy either.
Not at all. Yeah, and we're going to run through a few of the safeties here. So this Trayvon Moehrig, young ascending player here for the Panthers. They needed safety help in particular. So I think this is a good deal for them. Again, contract is a little bit more than you would like to, but young ascending player needs some help there. So I like the move overall here for the Panthers.
Yeah, I think that, just as you mentioned, the contracts are a little crazy. Obviously, we would want everyone to be cheaper than they actually are. It just
Good
kind of
point.
goes. It just kind of goes to show that maybe this draft, it's maybe tipping the cap a little bit to what these teams are feeling like in the draft. So, or maybe
Yeah.
that's just the price tag of safeties and DBs nowadays.
Well,
But
and I think this is, like I mentioned for the interior offensive line, I think this was a particularly strong safety free agent class as well. Maybe those were only some of the two actually strong positions in the free agency class. Obviously, a lot of other positions were pretty weak this year. So I think that's a part of it as well. But I agree, not a great safety class either. So
I think for the Panthers, though, I won't touch on it too much. Young defense, one of the worst defenses in football, maybe ever we've seen. So just getting talent in the building is all you need. So they can afford to shell out maybe contracts that aren't their favorite at the cost of bringing in talent. That's kind of
yeah,
my perspective on it. But we'll transition to Cam Bynum. This contract really surprised me. 4 years, $60 million. Cam Bynum is a fine player. I mean, he's more of a savvy and smart safety as opposed to maybe someone like Javon Holland, who's a little bit more explosive and dynamic. Cam Bynum will get the job done, and he proved that with his tenure with the Vikings. He proved it at Cal and Cal Berkeley, where he went to school, and he's rewarded in the contract. And that Colts secondary just looking better and better.
yeah, good for them again, Colts like, but I think again, let's get some secondary help. They needed safety, so I think this is a pretty good move for them.
I like it.
Yeah. And then again, kind of rounding us out here, Broncos made some moves in their secondary as well. So Hufanga here, Tyler Hufanga, again, another guy who has had the injury bug a little bit, but played really well I think he's a former All-Pro actually. So again, good player. Get somebody in their secondary to keep bolstering that defense. They added Dre Greenlaw as well, which we'll touch on in a minute here. Not a bad deal, I would say, as long as he can stay healthy. So again, I like the addition. This is a guy who's got the nose for the football. Let's kind of keep that mantra going for the Broncos here with that stout defense.
Yeah, Hufanga is annoying in the run game. He fills the gaps very well. He'll come down and lay the wood. Kind of a box safety. Which is what the Broncos like to do on defense, is like to fly around and hit people. So it's a good move for them.
Yeah, and then late addition here, Justin Reed, safety, again for the Saints. I think this is a pretty good contract for them. Older players he obviously was started out in Houston, had a long stint there in Kansas City, played well for them as well, helped them lead them to some Super Bowls. So I think this is good. Pairing him up with Tyrann Mathieu, again, I think let's get some talent for not a bad deal. Again, the Saints are kind of strapped in cap hell for who knows how much longer here, but I think this is overall a pretty good move from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's a fair contract. I think that it's a good move. Saints also need just talent, and I believe they brought Tyrann Mathieu back, so there's your safety duo. And the Saints ended up getting the the best number 2 kicker in the league. So they got them. I was joking with a buddy about that. But transitions to Javon Kinlaw. I don't really know how to feel about this one. I haven't given this one too much thought. I think that just whenever you have a young former first-round player, I think you just take the risk, and I think that's what Washington did here. You got any thoughts?
I'm going to actually go as far as saying this is one of my least favorite moves actually this cycle so far. Yes, former first-round guy, but he just really hasn't shown anything in San Francisco or in New York, and so I don't like the contract for him. I think this is a massive overpay. I think it's, again, we've talked about it, it's a deep D-line class, particularly interior D-line, as well. And so I think they could have found a better fit in the draft. They obviously traded some picks away for Laramie Tunzel, which I didn't include in this year, but we'll talk about it, in our next video. But yeah, I'm not sure this is the best move for them for those various reasons.
I think they just see the window. Obviously, one of the top 4 teams last year almost made the Super Bowl. I think they just want to capitalize on their window, and they're willing to shell out some money to get solid players. And I think that's kind of just all this is.
He is young too, so maybe he ascends into something better here. But yeah. So next one here, Grady Jarrett. This one was pretty quick here by the Bears. I think it makes sense. Let's get another vet leader on the team. I think Ben Johnson's really going for let's change the culture here. We need to kind of start from the ground up, the trenches, that sort of thing again. So, pretty big contract here for Grady Jarrett. But again, he's obviously a proven, very good player. This is one of the faces of the Atlanta Falcons. So, somewhat surprising to let him go, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think it's a good move for the Bears. So, really, the Bears are making a lot of great moves this offseason. I'm sure you're not too happy about that. But this is another good move, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, and maybe I disagree with you on this one a little bit. I do think the Bears are having a strong free agency and obviously trading and just offseason in general. They're having a strong year. But Grady Jarrett's not the player he once was. So I think I'm fine with this. I'm not super concerned about this. This doesn't move me to a point where I'm fearful of that D-line now. Sure. So I think it's fine. But I think it's an upgrade, obviously, for the Chicago Bears. So overall, I think if you're a Bear fan, you're pretty happy with that.
Fair point. Yeah, this one here, again, not a great move in my opinion. I think that, again, this is a massive overpay for Aaron Banks, a guard here for them. Not the best player. I think that I've seen a lot of Packers fans online kind of talk about it. This didn't seem maybe a need, but it doesn't seem like, or it sounds like it was definitely a need for them. But it doesn't seem like this was the guy to get, especially when the Packers are really good at developing that interior offensive line. And so I think they could have done better in the draft. They had some young guys on the roster in the interior that I think could have developed at least a similar rate to Aaron Banks. So I'm not sure shelling out this much for him was the best move, especially because they don't have the most money in the world to spend. And if you think about it, a lot of people will be talking about the Packers this year kind of needing to get their ace, somebody who's really going to be a big difference maker for them. I'm not sure shelling out this money for a fringe starter guard makes the most sense when you've already got some youth and depth there.
Yeah, and I think that Bengal mentioned this. I don't really know what this looks like for the offensive line. I know in the mock draft we did with Drew, you can go check that out on the YouTube channel. I had the Packers mocking Alabama guard Tyler Booker. You already knew I was going to forget it.
I did. I was waiting. I was licking my chops waiting for you to.
I had them getting Tyler Booker, but that was more of a we have a good player falling. This to me is more of a we're overpaying for a borderline bad player. And I think it causes, back to the Bengal point, I kind of got off track, but I think it creates some questions for what do you do on the offensive line now because, there's players at guard who can maybe switch to different positions. There's people leaving. What do you do at the center spot? So I think there's a lot of possible options there, but this contract is the contract to where he's going to start. So maybe you're even downgrading with a higher price tag is the point I was making with that. So this has got to be, for me, the worst move of free agency so far, and I love to see it's for an in-division rival.
Yeah, it's one of the worst for sure. On the flip side, I think this is a pretty good deal. I don't know what your thoughts are on this one. Dre Greenlaw coming off the injury. They upgrade over Cody Barton here at the linebacker spot. They get a leader in there, somebody who deserved a chance to be kind of that front man there for the Broncos. Again, they're just finding headhunters there in Colorado. So I think, again, not a bad price tag, maybe a little bit high for a linebacker spot, but I think it's overall a pretty good deal for them. And I think, again, they're kind of getting a leader in there, and again, somebody who just has a nose for the football. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it fits what they're trying to do. Obviously, as I've mentioned, they brought in his teammate Hufanga, so they're just trying to, as you mentioned very well, the headhunters. That's kind of the identity they're building and kind of the identity they have with. This bothers me so bad, dude. I keep forgetting it. The guy who just balled out for them, the Oklahoma edge rusher. Why am I? It doesn't matter. This is the type of player they're looking for. Build the culture, dude. You know who I'm trying to say. Why am I blanking on his name, man?
I'm actually on this one. I'm blanking too, actually.
Dude, I liked him coming out of college too. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You know who I'm talking about at home. Almost led the league in sacks, edge rusher.
Help us in the comments in this one here.
Help us in the comments, all 7 of you watching the video. No, it's thank you, Graham. Nick is in my head.
I'm looking right now.
It doesn't matter. If you just look up Broncos edge rusher, it should be one of the top ones. We're getting
Nick Bonito.
Nick Bonito. Nick was in my head. I couldn't get the last name. Anyways.
Yeah, Nick Bonito. We both missed on that one. I'll give you credit.
We're going on a deep tangent right here. We're 40 minutes in, so our minds are starting to waver here. No, I think that all that to say, this is the identity they want to build. Fast, physical players. That's what the whole point was. Obviously didn't look the same off of the Achilles. Dre Greenlaw was maybe a little bit more timid in his movements later in the year when he started to get more snaps. A lot of that might just come with playing a notoriously aggressive position off of a pretty bad injury. So maybe that's just par for the course, and he gets back into a groove. This is a super physical player, so I'm sure that it might hinder him a little bit, but I think it's fine. I think you make an improvement at the linebacker spot.
It's risky, but I think it makes sense. So we'll touch on 2 running backs here individually and then just kind of hit on some notable other signings just kind of quickly here to wrap up the video here. But on this one, I did want to talk about these 2 running backs. I actually like both of these signings a lot. I don't know how you feel about them, but I think these are actually 2 great signings, and I think this has potential to really hit for these teams individually. So up first for the Chargers, they got Najee Harris here, 3-year, $35 million deal. Not bad value, I would say, for still a young running back who can definitely take on that load for them. I really love the fit Najee Harris with.
Continue.
Let's keep going. Pause. Let's keep going. So, Najee Harris, he can take on the bell cow workload for them, I should say.
Good verbiage.
And so again, this is a player that really fits that scheme, I think, in my opinion, where you've got Harbaugh wanting to run the ball here, you're wanting to pound the rock, and I think that Najee really fits that. And so
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
We got to move past it. We have to move past it.
You're right.
All right. So yes, I like this move. Why don't you talk about Najee Harris?
Yeah. I'm so sorry, dude. I don't care. Najee Harris. No, I'm actually in full agreement. I think this is a good move.
We gotta pull it together.
I know. I'm so sorry. I can't. It's getting late. It's 10 o'clock, dude.
Yeah.
No. Najee Harris, great signing. Contract is fair. I actually wanted him to become a Viking. I think he's pretty underrated as far as running backs go in the modern NFL, I guess. Statistically on paper, the yards per carry, stop smiling. The yards per carry is not where you want it to be behind a bad Pittsburgh offense, but I do like the player, and I think that his tape is better than what his maybe his stats would allude to. So we'll move off of Najee, unless you had any final thoughts.
Well, just last point, I think that could be one of the signings that ends up being a big hit for the chart. Well, for everybody, I'm just saying one of the better hits at this point.
Especially in that Harbaugh offense, for sure.
I think it's just such a great fit. I really like it here for them. And then, Javonte Williams, I like this signing here for them too. Another young player coming off some injuries, but at the same time, it's a guy who looked really good early on. The viewers are going to think we're so childish for still laughing at this.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's me too. I think this was a good signing from the standpoint that, again, a young player who still has some potential. He can catch the football. He can run the football. You need a running back badly in Dallas. And so I like the move from that standpoint. I'll have to edit so much of this out because this is getting bad.
It's because the camera's on, dude. I wouldn't be laughing if the camera wasn't on. All right, Javonte Williams.
Half of what we do is with the camera on. So,
right, I know. No, you're right. I'm locking in. Javonte Williams, I don't know what the future looks like with
No, sorry.
I don't know what the future looks like with Javonte Williams. Obviously not
coming
the
off
same.
An injury, I don't think is going to be to his benefit, of course. It wasn't last year though, right? It was
2 years ago. It was 2 years ago, but still, not
the same guy. It didn't look like.
It doesn't look like the same guy, but I think that the Cowboys just desperately needed help anywhere they could get, and Rico Dowdle being your number 2 best skill player on offense is a problem. So, what this means for the draft, I don't know. I like that they went out and got a running back, though. Yeah, I think I don't think it keeps you from taking one, but I think you're getting at least another competent offensive weapon, and I think that's what the Cowboys needed. So this is like a B grade for me.
I think it's a low risk, good move at a position of need, and it gives you some flexibility. And I think that's what a lot of free agency is it has to give you flexibility. You touched on it earlier with the Raiders, getting Geno Smith. They're now not forced to take a quarterback at any point. They have flexibility to take BPA at whatever spot, especially at number 6. So I think that's kind of the main takeaway on that one.
Cool.
But let's transition here just to a couple last kind of notable acquisitions here. Morgan Moses, I think, was a good deal for the Patriots here. You get an older guy in there, someone who can start for you at either side if they need him to, depending on what they do in the draft. You touched on Ryan Kelly here being a signing for you guys. There was some familiarity with Will Fries. I think Josh Palmer out of this list is one of the sneakily best signings here, in my opinion. I like Josh Palmer a lot as a player. I think he could be a good fit in Buffalo. Obviously not a crazy splash signing, but I like that they got some more receiver depth. They re-signed Khalil Shakir. They obviously have Keon Coleman. I think Josh Palmer is a good fit for them. But nobody's super notable here, but just, do you have any other points you want to make on this?
Yeah, no, I'll just second you on that Josh Palmer move. Certainly an upgrade over someone like Mac Hollins, who they had recently, or Am I getting
Yeah,
my
they
players
did.
mixed up?
No,
Sorry.
you're right. You're
For
right.
some reason, Josh Palmer, Mac Hollins, and Gabe Davis all are the same player in my mind. I don't know what it
Well,
is,
as of
but
now, they've all played for Buffalo. Or, well,
right.
Josh Palmer hasn't played for them yet, but
Just
yes.
I don't know if it's the build or what it is, but they all remind me of the same thing. So I was getting them mixed up. No, Josh Palmer is certainly the best of those three. Actually, a very solid separator. So I think that's something that Buffalo could desperately use. Josh Palmer also just a very consistent player. I think that he always shows up. And then Daniel
Last,
Jones is
I was gonna say,
sorry,
yeah. Let's
yeah,
talk about the. Well, I was gonna say, let's talk about the quarterbacks. You go ahead.
yeah. So Kenny Pickett obviously getting traded. I've been hammering home the point that I think Cleveland doesn't take quarterback. I don't think that changes, but I think if they were to go quarterback, this puts them in a position on draft night to where they could or they couldn't. So I
Again,
still
flexibility. We talked.
flexibility. It's every team that could have landed a quarterback is going to land a quarterback prior to the draft, because if you don't, it's going to be very evident to the entire league that you're going to be targeting that position. So we're going to see obviously the Giants and the Steelers do the same thing, as we've already mentioned. But yeah, Kenny
Yeah.
Pickett getting traded. I don't think Cleveland goes quarterback. We'll see what happens. And then real quick on Daniel Jones, I was expecting him to re-sign with the Vikings. I I don't really know what that looks like for Indianapolis, if they're already, if they're willing to even give Anthony Richardson a QB battle. I mean, maybe it's best if he sits. I don't know if it's best if he sits in Indianapolis, but we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah, and then just quick notes here. We're not saying that Kenny Pickett is like their best option. We're not saying that he should even start for them, but this is a fairly young player. He's got some experience. At the same time, Cleveland, they need to know a little bit where they're at. You did re-sign Myles Garrett, but at the same time, are you really competing? I mean, you need quarterback, but are you willing to reach at quarterback at least early in the draft? So again, we're not saying Kenny Pickett is their best option or even should start or anything of that nature. But, again, overall, it is a move that I think has to affect draft night a little bit. But
Yeah.
on Indianapolis, Daniel Jones just clearly thought this was his best chance to start in the NFL. It sounds like it is going to be an open competition between him and AR. I think somebody made the point that if AR loses that battle, it was never his to win anyways. And I think that's, again, to the fact that AR has just not been the player that the Colts had hoped for him to be. But, that's remained to be seen. So I think ultimately he could still win that battle. But
Yeah, no, and I'm going to say one last thing about Daniel Jones before we move on to the defensive side. But no, this is a lose-lose for Indianapolis. Either you shell
I
out 1
agree.
year, $14 million for Daniel Jones, or your quarterback that you drafted fourth overall is losing the QB battle to Daniel Jones. So this is a lose-lose scenario to me. But we move anyway. So then we transition over to the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think I think all the corner signings were really good moves here. I like the Nate Hobbs signing. I like the Paulson Adebo signing. I like the Jordan Lewis signing. So actually, all the corner contracts I think were pretty good here on this one. Maybe a little steep for a few of them here, but especially Jordan Lewis I think was a good deal. Going to be their starting nickel, so I like that move for them. Cody Barton, good value signing there for the Titans. Needed inside linebacker depth more than anything, and so I think this is a good player who's got a nose for the football. I like that. For the D tackles, I really like what you guys are doing, of course, there in Minnesota, shoring up that D line there. So I think that's a positive. Hassan Reddick for the Bucks. I think this is I think a fairly safe move from the standpoint of he's got some risk inherently, but you need to upgrade your edge rusher. If he can get back to end of his Panthers tenure, kind of his Eagles tenure, I think you're looking at a kind of a steal there. Of course, he didn't play really at all for the Jets this past year, and so I think from that standpoint, it makes sense. You need to upgrade edge rusher as well, and so yeah, those are a few of the moves that I like.
Yeah, and I think I actually like all three of these DBs, and I like all three of where they ended up. I think Paulson Adebo, in particularly with the Saints, I thought that he showed a ton of promise prior to that broken leg that he had. One of my favorite DBs in the class, the free agent class, that is. Nate Hobbs, also with I about said Oakland, with Las Vegas Raiders, did his thing as well. So I think those are two very solid players. And then
Good
Jordan
nickel for them
Lewis,
too.
and then Jordan Lewis has been a Cowboy staple for a few years now. I know they were sad to see him leave that building, but he gets a good contract in Jacksonville, and he's one of their guys now. So, and then obviously the DTs. I think all of the DT moves, Poona Ford to the Rams, and then Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen are great moves for a team that desperately needs trench help. So, I think that all
Yeah.
makes sense.
I like the edge rushers too. A lot of these guys listed here are at least Kunsei, Deo, and then Joe Tryon. Those are some young guys. I think those are, again, moves that could potentially benefit them in the future, being the teams that is, and so we'll second to see where those go there. But yeah, I like a lot of the moves here on this list. So, any other thoughts on this one here before we wrap this up, Micah?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. This is kind of our big free agency recap. We're going to do another video here where we're actually grading each team and kind of how they look in terms of free agency. We won't touch on everybody individually, but of course we will talk about how each team fared. So, yeah, appreciate you guys sticking with us through the giggles here. But thanks everybody, and we'll see you in the next video. Appreciate it.
Till next time, guys.